I heard the neighbors shout goal, and felt the yard explode with boys, sunscreen, and pizza steam, and it hit me how small the world could be when it reduced to that one perfect chaotic moment full of noise. Owen, my son Owen, ran circles around the inflatable net like he'd been set loose, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat, knees scraped from earlier tackles, and a cardboard crown he'd insisted on wearing for reasons he hadn't bothered to explain. I clapped when he blew out his candles. He held his breath in that dramatic way kids do, then exhaled and looked like the happiest creature on earth with frosting on the corner of his mouth. I felt proud in a way that made my chest ache, the kind of ache that comes from doing something right for someone you love. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I read the message with my thumb before I even wanted to. Don't be dramatic, it's just a kid's party. It was from my mother. The words landed in me and sat there the way a stone sits in a shoe. No apology, no running late, no we'll be there soon. Nothing that admitted any kind of responsibility. I held my phone in one sticky hand, the other hand covered in cake frosting and a smear of blue icing where Owen had decided to decorate a cupcake. For a second I let the sugar in my fingers remind me of the day's purpose. Make this about him, nothing else. Then I turned my face back to the yard and let the words recede like a tide. I went inside with cake crumbs left on the counter and a bowl with frosting still clinging to the sides, thinking about how many times I'd swallowed words for family and how often it had felt like ordinary swallowing. I remember my father leaving when I was 22 and how my mother had told me, "You're the man now," like she was handing over a job description with no benefits. Since then I'd memorized every emergency, every unpaid fee, every favor that got repaid with a text that said thanks, like a receipt. Standing in the kitchen, hands sticky with cake, I stared at that message again as if the screen might offer a different answer the second time. It didn't. It only showed that some people put brunch before birthdays and that some people assumed I'd always be the one to make things work. Then I cleaned my hands without drama, wiped the counter, and walked back outside. I told myself I wasn't going to let someone else's small cruelty ruin this afternoon. I told myself Owen didn't need drama, he needed normal. So I handed out slices like everything was normal, even as the words hummed in my head. Want a piece? I asked, smiling the way I'd practiced in the mirror, and the boys whooped and grabbed plates, sticky fingers bumping into mine, and the world narrowed to plastic forks and laughter. Owen handed his piece to a kid who had lost a tooth the week before and smiled like a king passing a feast. People drifted in and out of the yard. The neighbor with the cooler refilled drinks without asking and joked like we'd known each other our entire lives. Someone's dad talked about a school fundraiser, another mom offered to take a leftover pizza box home. The sounds braided together, the crack of a plastic bat, a boy counting off plays, a mother warning someone about sunscreen, and they made a rhythm that kept me steady. Inside, my chest still felt a little tight, a place where the message had lodged like a splinter. I thought about the dozen times my family had shown up as outlines rather than people, polite in public but absent where it mattered most. After the party, when the grass was a mess of flattened footpaths and the inflatable net looked like a tired animal, I packed leftovers into foil and folded up chairs. Owen sat on the curb with a slice of cake on a paper plate and jammed a toy guy into the slice like he was piloting a shuttle. He didn't ask about who hadn't come. He didn't ask about the message. He was 9 and full of the sort of resilience you only get when your biggest worry is whether your building kit has enough stickers. He smiled at me with blue icing on his chin and said, "Dad, that was the best birthday ever." Those words cut clean through the bitterness and landed with the weight of truth. So I let myself be held by that small, honest thing. I said, "Good, I'm glad you had fun," and meant it with everything in me. I felt a hard line shift inside, something loosening where I'd tightened to hold everyone up. I still had the message and I still knew what it meant, but for that night I decided the single most important job was being Owen's dad, not being everyone else's unpaid bill. I wrapped the leftover cake in foil, loaded the party rubbish into the trash bag, and carried my son to the car with his head full of plans for the spaceship we'd build that night. I saw the notifications light up like small fireworks, and it felt like someone else was narrating the day, not the people who mattered. Courtney's sister posted a boomerang of mimosas and mother laughing in sunglasses, all sun and sparkle like they'd invented joy that afternoon. Aunt Donna had a picture of party bags lined up like trophies. Marcus, brother, sent a gym selfie with that half smile that says he's busy improving himself. Their group chat looked like a highlight reel, filtered, cropped, perfect, while my yard was full of muddy cleats and sticky hands and the real ordinary mess of a good birthday. I walked through the back gate and watched Owen kneel on the living room rug with the plastic pieces spread around him like a tiny construction site. He didn't ask where Grandma was. He didn't need to. He only needed the instruction sheet and me to pass him the right piece. I sat down cross-legged and we built the spaceship together, his small hands fitting parts with intense focus, my hands steadying pieces when he asked. He hummed to himself while he worked, a soft sound that filled the room better than any brunch photo could. The TV was off, the routine of the day shrinking to this one shared project. When the last kid left and the street quieted, I boxed the leftover cake and stacked the folding chairs against the shed like soldiers on break. The yard still smelled faintly of grease from the grill and sunscreen and that sweet sting of birthday candles blown out too fast. I felt pride wrapped up with exhaustion, the kind that depends on small rituals to make it real. Folding chairs, wiping crumbs, making sure every plate is accounted for. Owen came inside with frosting on his chin and a glue-on sticker stuck to his thumb and asked, "Can we make it fly tonight, Dad?" I told him yes, and he beamed like I'd promised the moon. Sorry for the quick interruption. If you're enjoying this so far, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave comment below. It really helps the channel grow. Alright, let's jump back into the story. Later that night, after the dishes were washed and the boxes put away, my phone rang. It was Mom. She left a voice message that still sits in my head like a blister. "Don't make a big deal, Jason. He's 9, he'll barely remember." I listened to it twice, then played it a third time like I could find a softer tone inside the words. There was no regret in her voice, no "I'm sorry we were late," nothing that admitted they'd missed anything. It was an attempt to shrink the moment, to tell me what it meant for my son, not to ask how I felt. I let the message sit in the phone and go cold like last night's coffee. I washed the cake knife until the sink echoed and put it in the drawer like it hadn't just been a tool for making my boy happy. I sealed cookie tins and slid the leftover cake into the fridge, then closed the door and stood there a moment, feeling the house hold its breath. My hands, which had been cleaning and fixing all afternoon, suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else. I realized I'd been doing this for years. Smoothing things over, making sure no one had to admit they were wrong, writing checks with a smile, fixing problems that other people caused. That habit had a cost, and I could feel the bill arriving. I thought about the time Dad left and the way Mom said, "You're the man now," like it was a title I'd earned by default. I thought about the long list I kept of unpaid favors and emergency expenses, how I'd always been the fallback, the one who made sure the kid had shoes and the studio had hosting and the rent was covered when someone forgot. Those things had slowly become expectations, not gratitude. They were quiet until they were. That message, that brunch photo, the patron listing, each one peeled back another layer of the old assumption that I'd always be invisible until someone needed money. Something in me hardened that night in a way that wasn't loud but was steady and true. Not anger that would explode, but a clean, sharp decision like a file hitting metal. I told myself out loud, no more default. I wasn't practicing drama. I was practicing boundaries, and right then boundaries felt like a small life raft I could hand to Owen. He needed me awake and present, not stretched thin by obligations that came with no conversation. I folded my arms as if checking a tool belt I'd never used before and felt the unfamiliar click of something set in place. Owen fell asleep with the half-built spaceship beside him, the stickers still waiting for finishing touches. I took the box to the closet and shut the door gently, not because I wanted to hide the day, but because I wanted to protect it. I sat on the couch listening to the house settle and let the hard edge inside me smooth into something practical. I would tell them no when I needed to. I would answer their calls with clear terms. I would be Owen's dad first, not their unpaid ledger. Tonight that felt like the only honest thing left to do. 2 days later my phone buzzed and I opened the family chat like it was habit, and there it was. A glossy PDF with velvet drapes, orchids, and a ballroom lit like a movie. The headline had that curated shine and the bottom had a single line that felt like a punch. $1,900 per person with RSVP by Friday in small, polite font. I read it twice and then read it again because the numbers kept looking wrong, like a typo I was supposed to correct for them. I felt a cold knot in my stomach that didn't have anything to do with money at first. And then it did, because money was the language my family spoke when they wanted something real. My mother added a message underneath like she was writing a footnote. "We'll need Jason to cover Grandma's seat, she's on a fixed income." No comma, no please, nothing that asked. It was a statement putting me into a role without asking whether I could or would. There was no sorry about last Saturday. There was no acknowledgement that someone had stood in a yard handing out cake while the people who were supposed to come took selfies at brunch. It felt like a neat little motion. Assume Jason will handle it, move on to the orchids. Courtney's sister had already done the part that mattered. She added my name to the sponsor list at the bottom in tasteful script, my full name printed under patrons. She didn't ask. She didn't text to say, "Hey, can I list you?" Or "Do you mind?" She moved as if my name were a resource she could draw from the way you draw water from a well. Seeing my name there felt like finding one of your dollars folded into an invitation you didn't get asked about. It smelled wrong, like stale coins in a perfume bottle. I printed the PDF because paper makes things more real. The glossy folded slowly in my hands like a map of expectations. I taped it to the kitchen cabinet for a moment, then pulled out a blank sheet and a pen. I made 2 columns because that's how I think. Left column, what I pay for. Right column, what they ask for. The left column filled fast. Soccer fees, shoes for Owen, gas money for Courtney when she was late paying bills, Marcus's copay that one winter, the hosting bill I covered when a client was late. The ink ran steady down the page like a meter tracking every favor I'd turned into a habit. The right column started with the new line item, ballroom gala $1,900 PP grandma's seat. Then more items I thought of under pressure, flights they expected me to buy when grandma needed to be moved, deposit for Marcus's court thing, a donation Courtney wanted to call support. The list kept growing because memory is generous when it's not being asked to pay. Each item took up more space until the paper felt dense with other people's assumptions. My handwriting got tighter as the page filled and the pen felt heavier in my hand, like someone had salted it with lead. As I wrote, I thought about how these expectations had built themselves into the architecture of our family. When Dad left, Mom handed me the roll like a toolbox and left the instruction manual unwritten. I learned how to fix things, how to calm storms, how to cover sudden bills. It became a muscle: reach, help, fix, forgive. But muscles get tired when they're used to hold weight that never shifts back. I had been carrying more than kindness. I had been carrying the invisible invoices of other people's choices. I remembered specific mornings and receipts. I remembered driving across town at midnight because Marcus called and the tire light blinked, and how I had told Courtney I could float web hosting for 3 months while she got her studio off the ground. I remembered Grandma's Medicare paperwork I once lined up and the quiet thanks that didn't last a week. I counted the months when their social posts looked like celebrations while my bank balance looked like maintenance. Those memories stacked like the receipts on my desk and made a high, wobbly list that this single RSVP pulled into focus. My son Owen's son was inside building a spaceship like nothing weighed him. He didn't know about the PDF or the patron list. He only knew his stickers and which piece fit where. That gave me a strange clarity. If I kept saying yes, I would keep giving my attention and my money away until I had neither left for him. If I said no, I might lose them. If I said yes, I would lose something quieter but more important: the ability to decide for my own house. When the sheet was full and my pen left a small black puddle at the bottom where my hand slowed, I folded it and slipped it into a drawer. The pen felt spent and hot in my fingers. I could hear the house breathing around me, Owen's small steps, the refrigerator hum, and I felt a determination like a low, steady engine turning on. This was my money, my bandwidth, my front porch. The list had been necessary to make visible what they'd been treating like public property. It also made the decision simple in a way my heart hadn't let me before. I would stop being their default. The pen finally came to rest, and with it something in me settled into a new, quieter line. The next morning my phone buzzed and there it was, a short line from Mother that read, "Don't be difficult, your cousin is only 17 once." That sentence landed like someone closing a door in my face and leaving me outside. I read it 3 times because I wanted to find a missing comma or a joke that explained it away. There was nothing. It was a shove that pretended to be advice. The part of me that had been softening, trying to let Grace have a go, felt finished. It was like water finally finding the edge of a cliff and dropping. I had no more slope to give them. I walked around the house with the message in my pocket, feeling it scrape at things I'd done from habit. I thought about the years I'd smoothed their edges, the nights I stayed up fixing problems that weren't mine, the checks I'd sent with an extra 5 because they were short. The message wasn't about a party or a gala only. It was about a pattern that let others write my name in ink without asking. I pictured my father leaving all over again, and how Mom had handed me the responsibility like a baton with no race plan. Enough of carrying what other people treat like a permanent fixture. Then my eyes fell on the brass key on my ring. The old one Mom had a copy of because Courtney's sister borrowed it months ago. Seeing it felt like seeing an open tab at a bar, the kind of debt you don't notice until the bill arrives. I remembered leaving the porch light on for years, the small kindness that had become an open invitation. I pictured them letting themselves in when it suited them, taking seats and calling it family, not asking whether I was okay with the cost. The key made the problem tangible. If they could assume my name, they could assume my house was theirs too. I drove to the hardware store like I was making a small, necessary appointment with myself. The bell over the door dinged and the clerk asked if I needed help. I said, "New keys," like it was as simple as flipping a switch. The man behind the counter cut them while a radio hummed in the background. I watched the blank metal take the pattern of my lock, and each click in the machine felt like something resetting. I paid with a card and walked back to the car with a new ring of keys in my hand, the weight of them sounding different than the old set. Changing the locks was a small, private thing I did in the afternoon when the house still smelled faintly of pizza and cut grass. I put the screwdriver through the kit I keep for small jobs and my hand didn't shake. The deadbolt turned and the metal caught, and when it clicked into place I felt a small, hard thing in my chest close too. It wasn't violent, it was practical. A decision. The click was enough to say to myself that some lines needed to be drawn and honored. It was a boundary that said, without shouting, "You can't just list me without asking." It was me making a choice about what my home meant. I tested the lock 3 times and then sat on the porch for a long minute with the door shut behind me. I thought about Owen's son inside, building a spaceship out of plastic pieces and stickers, how he'd look up when I told him what I'd done instead of seeing it as an affront. I thought about my own father leaving and how I'd promised myself not to let absence be a pattern I handed down. The lock felt like an answer I could point to when someone later asked why I was different. It felt like a promise. Then I did something I'd avoided. I posted a photo in the family chat. The picture showed the empty folding chairs still crooked where they'd been stacked, the banner sagging with a few letters flapping, and the table with the cake box pushed to the side. The caption I typed was short and simple. "This was Owen's party. You said you'd come." I didn't add anger or an accusation. I didn't reach for guilt. I wanted them to see what their absence had looked like. I wanted them to hold that image for a moment and feel the small, visible fact of it. It was a small act of exposure, the kind that makes public what they'd preferred to leave private. I hit send and felt my thumb vibrate against the phone as the message moved out and into their world. For a second I waited for the usual defense, "Busy, don't guilt us, he'll get over it," and I braced for it. But I also felt a strange, steady relief, like cleaning out a closet and finding the floor again. The lock was changed. The photo was sent. The house would be my house for Owen and me, and the rest would have to walk to the door and ring like everyone else. The replies came fast and familiar, a chorus trained by habit. "We have lives, don't guilt us, kids don't care." They arrived like a drip of small stones at the edge of my patience, each one making the pile higher. Courtney, sister, circled my name and called me difficult in a group reply, as if refusing to be someone's unpaid spreadsheet was a personality flaw. Marcus, brother, texted a long message about expectations, about tradition, about how family works, and finished with, "You're being unreasonable." I read them on the couch with my phone heating up in my hand and felt the old weight of responsibility settle into my shoulders like a coat I hadn't meant to wear. I typed a single message and I kept it short because I wanted clarity, not a debate. "No," I wrote. "I will not pay for this event. I will not be listed as a sponsor without my consent. I will not cover grandma's seat simply because someone decided to assume I would." I hit send and then watched the little gray bubbles that meant delivered and read. The chat tried to pressure me with guilt and the language of family obligation, but my message was a line drawn in coal, visible, dark, and impossible to ignore. I was tired of being the backstop for choices I didn't make. Then I did something small and ridiculous and felt exactly as I hoped. I Venmo'd mother $1 with a single note that said, "Congratulations." It felt like holding up a mirror to their glossy PDF and saying, "This is the invoice." The $1 payment was a joke at their expense and a clean, quiet refusal to play along. It was also practical theater. People who depend on you to be invisible get used to that invisibility. I wanted to show them the absurdity in a way they couldn't edit away with a flattering brunch photo. Courtney fired back with a barrage of messages accusing me of public shaming, of creating family drama, of making everything about money. Marcus called to beg and then to scold. Aunt Donna sent a private text that said she was disappointed and didn't realize. The usual chorus. I could have gotten louder, matched their volume with my own. Instead, I chose to keep the tone simple and factual. I uploaded screenshots of the patron list, my message to the venue asking them to remove my name, and the PDF. I asked them not to accept any commitment for me, I wrote in a new message. They confirmed they will remove my name. Please stop adding my name without permission. That line felt like a small, necessary repair. After a few more barbs, I went into my phone settings and started trimming the noise. I blocked numbers for a while, not forever, just until the flood of accusations calmed into something that could be talked through like adults. I muted the group chat so my phone wouldn't ring every time someone posted a story from a brunch I hadn't attended. I changed notifications so the house could hold its breath without the chorus. It felt petty and it felt brave at the same time. Boundaries often look like small, boring actions, but they're what keep you from being pulled into someone else's chaos. Neighbors knocked the next day with brownies and a shrug that said they understood without judging. The boss texted, "Take some time," like a permission slip I hadn't known I'd need. A cousin messaged later to say, "Sorry man, that was messed up," and I filed that under small mercies. The venue removed my name after I emailed proof and asked them to do so, and when they confirmed, I felt a tiny victory like a stitch finally holding. That night I sat on the edge of Owen's bed and watched him breathe. He'd fallen asleep with a smear of chocolate on his top lip and a piece of blue icing still in the crease of his chin. He was small in the dark, a planet of Lego bits and sticker sheets orbiting his bed. I brushed the chocolate away with the pad of my finger and felt something settle inside me the way a puzzle piece finds its place. There was a certainty that wasn't loud. It was the kind of quiet decision that builds a life by being repeated. I will be here for him, not for the demands that come without conversation. I thought about all the times I had said yes because saying no felt like being mean. I thought about how many times my good intention had been mistaken for permission. The difference now was that my no had a reason and a boundary attached to it. That felt like a clean, practical thing. I left the door to his room unlocked and sat for a few minutes longer, listening to his breathe steady. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was a calm I hadn't allowed myself in years. When I finally went downstairs, the house was quiet and the group chat had settled into the angry hum of people who'd taken offense and then moved on to other things. I left their messages unread for the night because the last thing Owen needed was the ripple of adult storms washing over him. My phone sat face down. I made a sandwich, cleaned the crumbs, and put the dishes away the way I always do. Small acts that make a home. Small acts that tell my son without drama that he's the one I answer to first. The certainty I felt was not flash or fury. It was a steady, deliberate narrowing. This house, this child, my responsibility. The rest would have to wait their turn like everyone else. 2 days later, there was a knock so firm my stomach tightened before I opened the door. And when I swung it wide, 2 officers stood there in standard issue, polite and serious, saying a family member had called about threats, withheld property, and concerns for a minor's welfare. They introduced themselves, professional and calm, and I invited them in because there's no point making a scene when someone has already decided to call the police. They stepped inside like they do these checks all the time, scanned the living room, Lego pieces, the half-built spaceship, a couch with a blanket, and asked if we could speak in the kitchen where it was quieter and less public. I made them coffee because I've always found hospitality eases the moment, even with people in uniform, and then took out my phone to show proof. I slid screenshots across the table, the elegant patron page with my full name printed under patrons, the glossy PDF that demanded a $1,900 deposit per person, and the family chat thread where my name had been casually placed as a sponsor without my permission. I also showed the messages from Mom telling me not to be difficult and the brunch photos Courtney had posted. They listened without interrupting, writing notes as though they were building a report, eyes moving between the screens and me. The officers were careful and steady. They asked for specifics, the who, when, and how. They typed while I spoke. I told them about the locks, how I found the old brass key on my key ring that Mom had a copy of and how I'd changed it. I told them I'd posted the photo of Owen's empty chairs and that someone had reported that property was being withheld and that my child might be at risk. They asked if anyone had shown up at the house or tried to force their way in. I said no, not yet. I offered to show them the old key, and they took it, examining the worn brass like it might explain motive. One officer did a welfare check in Owen's room while the other stayed to take notes from me in the kitchen. I watched them calmly open the door and see a sleeping 9-year-old with chocolate on his lip and a spaceship propped against a pillow. They asked if he had been fed and if he had someone he trusted here. They nodded when I said I was his dad and that I was present. The officer told me how these calls happen sometimes in family fights when someone uses paperwork and panic as leverage. He used the word dispute, which felt small but accurate. They advised me the way professionals do. Document everything, save emails, take screenshots, and call immediately if anyone refused to leave the property. They explained that welfare checks are routine and that for any claim of threats or withheld property they needed proof, which I had been gathering. They asked about previous incidents and about any history of violence. I told them there wasn't any physical violence, just a long trail of expectations and assumptions about me paying and showing up without question. The officer wrote that down, steady and unemotional. They told me they would note my report and advised me on what to do if the situation escalated. When they left, they handed me their cards and said to call if I felt threatened or if anyone showed up trying to cross a boundary. Their faces were kind in the professional way that's meant to reassure without promising miracles. I stood on the porch after they left for a minute with the card in my hand like a small official talisman. It told me that what I'd been feeling wasn't imagined, that the world had rules I could point to when family pushed too hard. That afternoon, the venue emailed me back with a subject line that sat clean and final. Your name has been removed from all materials. I read it twice because it was almost anticlimactic, such a small administrative act compared to the emotional load, but it was also its own little victory. One thread of the mess had been cut clean. Someone had acknowledged that my name had been used without consent and had fixed it on their end. I saved the email to a folder I'd already started called Receipts Boundaries, the folder I kept for the things that mattered and needed proof. Even with that done, the house felt different. I walked through rooms I'd filled with repairs and favors and saw them as choices I'd made, not obligations handed to me. I showed the officers the screenshots of the patron page and the family chat so nothing could later be claimed as fiction. The act of laying everything out in black and white made it harder for people to pretend it hadn't happened. Documentation isn't glamorous. It's simply necessary when the other party thinks you'll always absorb the cost. After the officers left and the venue confirmed the removal, I made a small dinner and turned on a low light in Owen's room while he finished building a sticker-decorated rocket. I sat with him and watched him try each sticker until one felt right. He didn't know about emails or police cards. He only knew his dad was there and that the spaceship would have to be completed tomorrow. I felt a kind of tired satisfaction, the kind that comes from checking a series of practical boxes. Locks changed, receipts saved, the truth laid out. One thread had been cut, yes, but there were more to mend, and I was finally ready to do that on my terms. The social fallout spread fast, like someone splashing wet paint across a wall and stepping back to watch it run, and Courtney's sister posted a bright caption about toxic people with friends flocking with heart emojis as if they'd cast a verdict without hearing my side. Marcus' brother started texting again, more urgent and pleading this time, the same lines repackaged. Please cover the deposit, Jason. We need you. His messages felt like a trap, guilt dressed up as need, and I typed back a short refusal because I was tired of being the safety net for choices I hadn't signed up for. It didn't fix things, but it kept me from being drawn back into the old pattern. My mother left a voicemail that tried to be both wounded and outraged at once, the sort of diamond-cut feeling that aims to make you apologize before you understand why. She said, "You're making such a scene, Jason," then shifted to "How could you block people?" like two scripts running in the same voice. I listened in the dark and let the words circle. I pressed replay because I wanted to find a crack where apology might fit, but there wasn't one. The message was heavy with expectation and thin on responsibility. It landed like an assignment: repair what's been labeled broken because others refuse to look at their own hands. Courtney's friends chimed in on her posts and Marcus called twice and texted 6 times. Each ping pulled at something I'd spent years knitting into a safety net for them, but in the noise there were small, quiet messages that felt like stitches coming the other way. Aunt Donna sent a private text that said, "I'm sorry, I should have spoken up." It wasn't public or performative, it was a small, real thing tucked into the thread. The neighbor who brought the cooler earlier stopped by again and left brownies on the porch with a note. "You did right." The kindnesses were simple and human and meant more than the formal proclamations on social media. I made a folder in the cloud that night and named it Receipts Boundaries because it felt like the most grown-up thing I'd done in months, maybe years. I dragged screenshots into it. The PDF with the deposit, Courtney's patron page with my name, the messages telling me not to be difficult, the venue's email removing my name. I even saved the voicemail and the photo I'd posted of Owen's empty party chairs. It felt strangely cathartic to give these things a place where they could be altered by a caption or an edit. The folder was a small guardrail, one I could point to when I needed proof and not just memory. At work I told my manager I needed fewer weekend shifts because I wanted to be home for Owen. He surprised me by saying, "Take the time, family first." The man isn't warm, but he's practical, and that small permission from him felt like a key I hadn't realized I needed. I actually applied for a scholarship for Owen's soccer camp the same week, filled out the form, printed the receipts, and put a sticky note on the fridge that said camp application. Done. It was paper and pixels and small steps, but it also felt like making space for things that mattered without asking permission from people who'd proven they didn't prioritize us. The house began to breathe differently after that. The constant buzz of my phone dropped, and the living room noise settled into a rhythm of small, ordinary sounds. The kettle, the Lego pieces sliding across the rug, the distant hum of a TV episode we both liked. I noticed moments I'd been missing. How the light through the front window hit the bookshelf in the late afternoon, how Owen arranged his toys with a little ceremony before bed. Those tiny, ordinary rituals were what I'd been trying to protect all along, and by setting a boundary, I let them exist with less fear they'd be bargained away. People still tried to make the argument that family obligations trumped everything, tradition, duty, the idea that money equals love, but I started answering differently. When Marcus texted asking again, I'd write, I can't, I won't. When Courtney posted another glossy brunch that looked like nothing had happened, I didn't respond. Silence is part of the boundary sometimes. It's the empty space that lets the claim sit on its own weight. Saying no didn't make me less of a man or a brother. It made me a father who could show up without splintering. Some cousins reached out privately with questions and awkward apologies. A few sent sheepish messages like, we didn't mean for it to go this far, and I accepted those as small, imperfect moves toward repair. Aunt Donna's apology felt like a wedge I could use to open a conversation later, not to forgive everything immediately but to start a map toward something less transactional. These quieter threads felt more durable than the social media flash. They were conversations, not shows. At night, I checked the receipts boundaries folder again and closed the laptop with my hand on the cover like I was tucking something into a safe place. Owen sprawled across the couch with a sticker sheet in his hands and asked if we could finish the spaceship tomorrow. I said yes and meant it. The certainty I felt wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about making sure the person I loved most had someone who could be counted on steadily, not erratically. The house sighed, and for the first time in a long while, I let myself listen. That night of the gala, I decided we weren't going to sit at a stitched-up table in a ballroom that treated my name like a credit card. I told Owen's son, let's grab our sneakers, and he answered with the kind of quick yes that makes you forget the world for a second. We drove to the park with the windows down and the radio low, and I felt the car loosen like a muscle finally letting go. I didn't say anything fancy about it. I just wanted him to run and be a kid without the noise of other people's expectations crowding the air. We shot free throws until the sky went purple and the streetlights blinked awake. I kept count out loud because he liked hearing numbers, and he practiced his goofy victory dance when he made a shot. A kid walked by with a dog and asked to join, and Owen handed him a ball like we were starting a tiny league. I called out plays and he laughed into the backboard, the sound ricocheting and filling the space between us the way a good score fills an empty room. It was simple and honest, the kind of thing I'd been trying to protect by changing locks and saying a clear no. After the park, we got milkshakes at the diner on the corner where the waitresses knew Owen's name now and gave him an extra straw because he likes sharing, even when there's nothing to share but sugar. We sat at a booth, elbows sticky, talking about how our spaceship might need a radar dish and whether stickers made it faster. He told me which player at school was the best at headers and which kid ate ketchup on his fries like it was candy. I listened because being present was a practice, not a one-time win. Later, when we came home and the house hummed its usual night sounds, my phone buzzed. It was Aunt Donna texting me from the gala. Her message was small and soft. It was chaotic. Grandma was set up near dry ice and strobes. You missed nothing. She added an emoji like she didn't want to say the whole thing in words. I read it twice and then read it again because part of me wanted to believe there was comfort in the news, some vindication that the absence had not been a loss. The other part of me folded it into the folder I'd made in the cloud, receipts boundaries. The message belonged there too. I sat on the couch and watched Owen fall asleep on top of his half-built spaceship with stickers scattered around him like a constellation. He had a chocolate smear on his upper lip from earlier, and I wiped it off with my thumb because that's what dads do, small acts that say, without a speech, you're seen. I felt the weight that had been hot and raw cool into something clearer. The anger that had been a flare from all the assumptions and invoices and brunch photos stepped down and left room for decisions to sit like tools on a bench. Useful, ready, not used to punish. I thought about the day we'd had versus the one my family had chosen. Ballrooms with orchids and dry ice can look glamorous in a brochure, but they can also hide bad choices in pretty packages. I had been taught to fix things since my father left, and the phrase, "you're the man now," had been handed to me like a job description without vacation days. I had kept taking calls, lending money, driving across town at odd hours, smoothing the edges of people's problems until my list of favors read like a ledger with my name at the top. Changing the locks 2 nights ago felt small at first, like a practical chore. But each time I turned the deadbolt now, I felt the line I'd drawn, this house, this child, my limits. I would still help when I could, but I wouldn't be a rumor of resources that people could rely on without asking. It was less dramatic than I'd imagined. It didn't make the sky fall, but it did make space. It made room for milkshake nights and sticker battles and the quiet paperwork of being a present parent. I am a man who makes lists and watches where the last dollar went, and that day at the park I realized how much of my time and money I'd been giving away without debate. Saying no didn't feel like betrayal, it felt like calibration. I wanted my contributions to be intentional, not automatic. I wanted my son to understand what a boundary looked like by living with one, not just by hearing about it in an argument. When I tucked him in and turned his nightlight low, I said, "Tomorrow we finish the spaceship." He mumbled, "Okay, Dad," and his voice slid into sleep. I sat there for a long minute, feeling the house breathe differently around us. The ledger in my head, what I'd paid and what they'd expected, still existed, but it no longer owned the front room of my life. That belonged to Owen and to the small, steady choices I made for him. I kissed his forehead, walked out, and locked the door with the new key. The click felt like an answer I could live with. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. And drop a comment below, I'd love to hear your thoughts.